The first thing you felt was the scream. It wasn't just a note, it was a war cry. When Wilson Pickett opened his mouth, the air cracked like thunder and the crowd lost its mind. He didn't just sing soul music. He was soul raw, reckless, untamed. Every lyric dripped with sweat, pain, and fire. They called him Wicked Pickett, and he earned it. He fought his band, cursed his label, pulled guns on club owners, and still walked on stage every night in a three-piece suit like a preacher possessed. He was the R&B outlaw, the first true gangster of soul. But before the violence and the headlines, there was a boy, a barefoot child from Prattville, Alabama, born in a house without light but filled with sound church choirs, gospel hymns, and his mother's rage. They said even as a baby, he couldn't stay still. They called him Wiggly. He would grow into a man who could shake the world the same way, never still, never safe. From the cotton fields to the midnight stage lights, Wilson Pickett carved his name into the sound of America and bled for every note. Because behind every scream, there was a story. And behind every hit, there was hell. This is Wilson Pickett, the wicked soul of America. Before he was Wicked Pickett, he was just Wilson, a restless boy born into red dirt and hard times. The 18th of March, 1941, Prattville, Alabama. Population barely 2,000. The fourth of 11 children, raised in a one-room shack where laughter was rare and tempers came easy. His father, Wilson Sr., sold moonshine to get by until the sheriff caught him and sent him to jail. His mother, Lena, was strong but mean when angered. Once, when Wilson talked back, she hit him so hard with a stick she broke his arm. Violence wasn't learned, it was inherited. They called him Wiggly because he never stopped moving. He sang before he could read. His voice wasn't soft, it was jagged, like gravel and sunlight mixed together. Church was his first stage. His grandfather was the preacher, and the boy's voice would rise above the choir, loud and wild. But when the old man caught him humming blues in the fields, he beat him over the head with a Bible. God's music only, he said. Wilson didn't listen. He wanted to sing the songs that made people feel something. Every morning, he picked cotton until his hands bled. Every night, he sang Under the Stars gospel in his heart, trouble in his blood. He fought almost every day on the way to school, on the way back home. Even the bus driver had enough and made him walk. When he was 14, Wilson had seen enough of Alabama. He didn't want to pick cotton for the rest of his life, or be told what he could sing because of the color of his skin. He packed a small bag, carried his slingshot, and headed north to Detroit, the city of steel and sound. Detroit, 1955. His father had remarried and tried to straighten him out. Go back to school, he said. So Wilson enrolled at Northwestern High, the same school that produced future Motown legends, Florence Ballard of the Supremes, Norman Whitfield, Melvin Franklin of the Temptations. It was destiny waiting to happen. He joined a gospel group called the Violinaires, a church act that moonlighted as an R&B group under another name, the Gales. That's where Wilson found his people, men who could harmonize and still throw fists if they had to. He sang like a man twice his age, and when he closed his eyes, it was like fire had entered the room. Aretha Franklin met him around that time. She was 14, he was 15. They sang in rival choirs, both too talented to stay small. Even then, she called him dangerous. By the late 52nds, he was done with hymns. He'd seen Sam Cooke leave the church and make real money singing for the world. Wilson was ready to follow, to trade salvation for survival. And that's when the fire inside him stopped being holy and started being wicked. Detroit, in the late 1952, was a battlefield, disguised as a city cars, smoke, jazz, and gospel colliding in the same air. Wilson Pickett was 18, married, and restless. He'd left the church behind, joined a gospel to R&B crossover group called the Falcons, and started chasing the kind of fame that didn't ask for forgiveness. The Falcons were already known for their hit You're So Fine, but when Wilson stepped up to the mic, something changed. He didn't just sing lead, he took the song hostage. In 1962, I Found a Love hit number 6 on the R&B charts, powered by Pickett's rasping growl and raw electricity. For the first time, the world heard a voice that didn't just perform soul, it commanded it. Audiences went wild. Women screamed, men clapped like they were in church. Even James Brown, the Godfather himself, took notice. He respected Pickett but feared his energy. That boy could tear the roof off a funeral, Brown once said. But behind the stage lights, Wilson was impatient. He wanted to go solo. He sent demo tapes across the country. One of them, a song he wrote called If You Need Me, landed at Atlantic Records. They loved it, but instead of signing him, Atlantic gave the song to Solomon Burke, already a big name on the label. Burke's version became a hit. Wilson's heart became a weapon. He swore he'd never be cheated again. When his label, Double L Records, tried to hold him to his contract, he pulled a gun on the owner's partner and said, "You're gonna let me walk or you're gonna crawl." They let him walk. In 1964, Jerry Wexler at Atlantic finally called back. "Wilson," he said, "let's make a record the right way this time." Wexler sent him to Memphis to record with the Stax Records house band Booker T and the MGs, Isaac Hayes and Steve Cropper. The chemistry was immediate, explosive, divine. Together, they wrote In the Midnight Hour. Recorded in one take, the song became a thunderstorm on vinyl, part church revival, part street fight. It hit #1 on the R&B charts, crossed into pop radio, and sold over 1 million copies. Suddenly, Wilson Pickett wasn't just another soul singer, he was the new sound of America's rebellion. Over the next 2 years, he unleashed a string of hits that still define the genre. Land of 1,000 Dancers, 634, to 5,789, Mustang Sally. Each one sounded like it could set a building on fire. He strutted, screamed, and preached his way into history, a man possessed by rhythm and rage. The world saw a star, but those close to him saw the danger growing. Every night, his performances ended with sweat, blood, and broken glass. The legend of Wicked Pickett had arrived, and so had the storm that would eventually destroy him. Success made Wilson Pickett untouchable, and that's when the demons started knocking louder. By 1967, the charts belonged to him. Mustang Sally blared from car radios. Funky Broadway had made him a millionaire. But money didn't calm him. It fueled his fury. He was drunk most nights, high most mornings. Vodka for breakfast, cocaine for courage, and a pistol always within reach. He didn't trust anyone, not his managers, not his band, not even his friends. "People love your music," he said once, "but they'll steal your soul if you let them." The industry called him the Wicked Pickett, but his band had another name for him, the Ticking Bomb. He'd walk into rehearsal, spot a missed note, and swing his guitar like a weapon. Once, he fired his drummer mid-show, then punched his bassist for laughing. Another night, he drew his gun on a promoter who shorted his pay. Even in Vegas, he carried chaos in his pocket. By the early 70s, the drugs had him. Bobby Womack, his friend and guitarist, later confessed, "I gave him cocaine. I thought it'd help him tour. I didn't know it would take him away." Wilson's temper exploded at everything: betrayal, jealousy, silence. He shot at his brother James after accusing him of flirting with his girlfriend. He beat his partner Dovey Hall in drunken rages, then wept and swore he'd change until the next bottle broke. Then came the Vegas years, bright lights, long nights, and no escape. He was earning $17,000 a week, performing 2 shows a night, but he'd often skip the stage, lost in a hotel room, haze of powder and paranoia. He once insulted Elvis Presley over a microphone during a set, calling him overrated. Within an hour, Elvis's bodyguards, the Memphis Mafia, kicked down his dressing room door and warned, "Don't ever say the king's name again." He didn't. In 1974, he shot up a hotel room during a fight with the Isley brothers. Police charged him with reckless endangerment, but he smiled in his mugshot, proud, unbroken, invincible. Then karma came swinging. During a tour in the 80 seconds, Wilson punched his new bassist, Kevin Walker, for missing a cue. Walker grabbed a metal towel rack and smashed it into Pickett's left eye. The bone shattered. The blood poured. He never saw clearly again. From that day on, Wilson Pickett, the man who once lit up every stage, performed behind dark sunglasses. Not for style, but for shame. Labels dropped him. RCA, Motown. Everyone walked away. The hits stopped coming, the violence didn't. He spiraled into arrests, bar fights, DUIs. The headlines became a graveyard of bad choices. The man who once sang about love and freedom now sang to survive himself. His voice still had power, but the fire had turned against him. And when he looked in the mirror, behind those black shades, he saw not the Wicked Pickett the world adored, but a man finally realizing he'd become the thing he used to fight. Wilson Pickett's story was never just his own. It was America's story, the rise and ruin of a black man who gave the country its heartbeat and paid for it with his peace. In the 1,960 seconds, when the nation was torn apart by segregation and the fight for civil rights, Pickett's voice was something wild and free, too raw to be ignored. He was one of the first black artists to perform with live bands in front of integrated audiences. White kids danced next to black kids for the first time, not at protests or marches, but at Wilson Pickett concerts. The stage had become a battlefield for unity. He sang what the country was too afraid to say out loud. In the Midnight Hour wasn't just a love song, it was about hunger, survival, and that long wait for deliverance that every black soul knew too well. His voice carried the urgency of the movement, fierce, defiant, unapologetic. But America loved its black stars, only when they were smiling. The same system that sold his records whispered that he was too wild, too angry, too dangerous. When Pickett broke the rules, they called him wicked. When others did the same, they called it rock and roll. He became both hero and warning a man who embodied the power of black expression and the punishment that came with it. Otis Redding had died young. Sam Cooke was gone. James Brown was being hunted by his own demons. And Wilson Pickett, still alive, still fighting, became the symbol of everything beautiful and broken about soul music. To the black community, he was a contradiction they understood deeply. He came from nothing, spoke his mind, refused to bow, and the world punished him for it. He carried the rage of generations who'd been told to stay quiet. And when he screamed on stage, they screamed with him. In 1971, he performed at the Soul to Soul concert in Ghana, a homecoming for African American artists. Over 200,000 people filled the open-air stadium, chanting his name. For a moment, the pain of history turned into joy. Black America had sent one of its own sons back to the motherland, not in chains, but in rhythm. But joy doesn't last long in the empire of entertainment. As disco and pop began to take over, the industry moved on. The same America that once called him the voice of the people, now called him a relic. Yet every time Mustang Sally plays at a bar, every time In the Midnight Hour cuts through the static of an old radio, you can still feel what he gave this country, not just a sound, but a soul. Maybe that's what Wilson Pickett truly was. A mirror. Reflecting everything America wanted to dance to and everything it tried to forget. By the late 1,980 seconds, the world had changed, but Wilson Pickett hadn't. The stages were smaller, the crowds quieter, the demons louder. He'd become a man haunted by his own legend. One night, drunk and spinning out, he drove his car into an 86-year-old man crossing the street. The victim died days later. Wilson claimed it was an accident. The police found 6 empty vodka bottles in his car. The voice that once filled arenas now echoed inside a prison cell. He served a year. And when he came out, America barely noticed. In 1991, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame called his name. But he didn't show up. Too drunk. Too broken. Too tired of pretending. That same year, he was found barricaded in his home, high, shouting at shadows only he could see. To some, it was tragic. To others, inevitable. To those who had loved him, it was unbearable. He kept trying to come back. He toured, made small TV appearances, recorded one last album in 1999 called It's Harder Now. The title said everything. But his body was failing, liver, kidneys, heart. Years of addiction had carved him hollow. His daughters said he was skin and bones, found lying on the floor in his own home, too weak to move. Even then, he refused to quit drinking. "I needed to sleep," he whispered. What he really needed was peace. The 19th of January 2006, the night, finally went silent. Wilson Pickett died of a heart attack at 64. No stage, no lights, just a quiet nursing home in Virginia. The man who once set the world on fire had burned himself out. But legends don't end where they fall. After his death, the honors came: the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Grammy Hall of Fame, the Library of Congress. The same America that once feared his fury now framed his records in glass. His voice, that wild, holy thunder, is preserved forever, humming in the grooves of history. When you hear In the Midnight Hour, you don't just hear a song. You hear a man wrestling God in real time, a sinner demanding to be heard, even when the world stopped listening. You hear every bruise, every prayer, every moment of rebellion that built the foundation of soul music. Some legends stay clean. Wilson Pickett didn't. He left behind scars, lawsuits, and stories no one could fully verify, and yet the music endures. Because maybe greatness isn't about being perfect. Maybe it's about surviving long enough to tell the truth. He was never an angel, but he was honest. And in a world that keeps rewriting history, honesty might be the most sacred thing left. He sang about the midnight hour, the dark before dawn. Maybe that's where his spirit still lives, somewhere between sin and salvation, still screaming, still shining, still wicked, and still ours.